Today's episode with our special guest, Bill Tierney, covers the sensitive topics around addiction and substance use. We're very grateful to have the opportunity to share about the multifaceted healing path of recovery with you, our listeners. Thank you for joining us.
Let's get into this. I'm so excited that you're here, Bill. Thanks for doing this with us.
Well, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
It does get glitchy sometimes. Partners in their underwear have come through. That's happened.
Bill, I hope that doesn't happen for you today.
For all we know, Bill could be wearing his underwear right now.
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to get intimate like this, but yeah, I am wearing underwear.
We have our special guest today, Bill Tierney, who is a results coach and a certified internal family systems practitioner. Before he was introduced to IFS, he used the work of Byron Katie and now uses IFS with all his coaching clients. So he creates content, has his own podcast, and has a few different signature coaching programs, including the Self-Led Project and Self-Led Results. You work with individuals one-on-one, you facilitate monthly workshops. You're married to your third wife, Kathy, and between the two of you, you have 5 adult children, 12 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandson. Wow. And Bill, you've been clean and sober since 1982, and you enjoy working with people who are in recovery. So good to have you here, Bill.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Bill.
welcome, Bill. What a pleasure.
So since being clean and sober since 1982, 40 years, and I know that's what you wanted to share from your heart in today's episode is what is recovery and your journey this past 40 years, what it means to you over the years and what it means now and what it means to be recovered and what are we all recovering from? Wow.
Well, if you can indulge me, I'd like to take just a few minutes maybe to tell some of my story.
Absolutely.
So in 1982, I lived in Kalispell, Montana, and my wife and I had been married at that time for about 7 years.
Which wife was this, Bill?
This is my first wife. Lori was only 15 when I met her. I was 19.
Oh,
And
wow.
we got married like 1 month after she graduated from high school.
Oh my goodness.
And a couple of years later, we had our first daughter, Sarah, and then we had Billy. And so we had these 2 young kids when I got sober, very young, 2 and 3 years old. And the reason I got sober was because I was afraid she was going to leave me if I didn't. I didn't think I had a problem with alcohol, not at all. And she was working in a pizza place for a guy that had been sober for about 2.5 years. And so had befriended him and his wife, and they would come over with their daughter, who was Sarah's age. And I just resented the hell out of them. Yeah, I just resented them. I was drinking at them in our home. And one night, Tom asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting with him. And my brother Stan had gotten sober earlier that year. So I knew what AA was and I knew what a meeting meant. And at first I wanted to say, hell no, I don't want to go to a meeting with you. What do you think? I have a problem? But then it occurred to me, I could kind of keep an eye on him because I suspected that maybe he and my wife were having an affair.
Oh.
And so that's what motivated me to go to my first meeting with him.
Wow.
And it was the second meeting I ever gone to, and I liked it. It surprised me. It really surprised me that I liked what happened there.
And what was that you liked?
I liked that people were being real.
Yeah.
And I liked that I could kind of associate with them. I could relate to what they were saying, the struggle. And almost immediately I began to think, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if I did have a problem. Maybe if I quit drinking, some problems would start going away. Maybe Lori would like me better. So he asked me, do you think you can stay sober between now and 8 o'clock tomorrow night? And I scoffed and said, yeah, of course. It wasn't until months later that I thought about it and I realized I hadn't really been sober a full day. There wasn't a full day that I had gone without a drink for 9 years prior to that. And I realized, man, the scoffing was coming from a part of me that apparently didn't think I had a problem at all.
Right.
And but reality argued with that, which is that I definitely had a problem with that.
Yeah.
So at first for me, recovery meant not drinking. And I was so proud to have 30 days. I marked every day on a calendar. And then I was just delighted to have a year and at the same time, a little disappointed. Here I am a year sober and my body is still shaking and I'm scared to death in the world. And
Oh, wow.
the marriage hasn't gotten any better. It's still very tenuous. And now I'm 5 years sober, and it's still kind of the same. Sober, proud of myself, patting myself on the back. Kind of got some street cred now that I walk into the AA meetings, and there's Bill that's got 5 years of sobriety, and that was pretty cool. That was pretty good. Starting to sponsor guys and walking the walk, talking the talk, and doing all that stuff. Going to the meetings after the meetings, and then my wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was about 5-6 years sober. And for about 14 months, we went through this horrendous experience of her dying. And when she died, Billy and Sarah were 8 and 9 years old.
Oh, Bill.
And I found myself, I just found myself completely overwhelmed by the entire situation. Really didn't think that I was capable of raising 2 kids by myself. And yet I did, figured out that I could do that. And I was committed to not drinking. A lot of the people in the 12-step community said, Bill, do you think about drinking now that your wife's got a brain tumor and now that she's died? And I wouldn't think about it until they asked me. And even then, I didn't consider drinking as an option. But I did move to another addictive behavior, which was to get involved in, I was a serial relationship guy. I was moved from one relationship to the next. Almost immediately after she died, I was in relationships. And I had 5 relationships over the course of 2 years, and finally realized that the only way for me to stop being that serial relationship guy and running my kids through all these women was to get married again. So the emergency break for me was get married. And the woman that I married, she had just gotten sober again. She was a drug addict, an alcoholic. And as you can imagine, it was just a train wreck for about 8.5 years.
Yeah.
And I came out of that marriage, the second marriage, terrified that I had no control over the choices I made. I would find myself accidentally falling into another relationship. And it would be a disaster every single time. And it was like something was happening out of my control. And I didn't understand, why don't I have any control here? So that's when I discovered Byron Katie. After we'd been divorced for a couple of years, I discovered Byron Katie, and through the work of Byron Katie, which you can find at thework.com, I discovered there were ways to go inside and discover the real problem. And the real problem, of course, was my perception, my beliefs, my thoughts, and how being unaware of what was happening inside was, in fact, what was causing all the problems. And I believe that the day that I met Byron Katie and began to embrace her process was my first day of actual recovery, despite the fact that I was sober 22 years at that time.
Wow.
Maybe that's a good place to start, huh?
That really speaks to what you shared earlier about what are we recovering from?
Yes.
That's such a profound question. And what do you feel you were recovering from?
Well, for the first 22 years, I kept thinking that what I was recovering from was my overuse of alcohol. And then because I'd been introduced to the Adult Children of Alcoholics Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Other Dysfunctions, I think is what it's called now. I realized, and I'm codependent too. And
right.
I've got all these. I'm there's a laundry list in ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and I matched every single one of those. In fact, that was a list of how I lived my life. And so I realized I'm recovering from codependency, from being raised by violent alcoholic parents, from my overuse of alcohol. That's what I thought I was recovering from. But when I was introduced to Byron Katie, I realized I was recovering from my belief system. Yeah. And then later, when I discovered internal family systems, I learned and realized at a much deeper level that what I was recovering from was the trauma that formed that belief system.
Exactly. The trauma of the conditioning, which created so many parts to adapt. Wow.
Yeah.
Byron Katie helped me to recognize that I had a belief system. I remember sitting in AA meetings and hearing people talking about beliefs. And what I knew about beliefs up to that point was that it had something to do with God.
All faith-based versus anything else.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered the word belief beyond faith. And for me, that was a big problem, by the way.
Yeah.
When I turned 15 years old, my family moved from Kansas City, Missouri to Great Falls, Montana. And something changed that day. The day we left Kansas City, something changed. I no longer was pressured to go to church. I'd been raised in the Catholic Church until through the 9th grade and went to Catholic school. And when I was 8 years old, I'm sitting in a catechism class and they're telling me how the whole Christian thing works. And I was looking around the room to see if anybody else was buying it. And apparently I was the only one. And when I raised my hand, I got a really stern look from the nun that said, "Don't you ever question this."
Why does that not surprise me?
I love it.
Your defiant fuck you parts were already getting established.
Yeah.
Well, you were born with those.
I love it.
That's who you are, right?
Well, it's certainly a part of who I am. And the defiance is absolutely still there. It just doesn't have the rage and anger behind it anymore.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that.
It's channeled brilliantly.
Thank you.
Well, it's also interesting, Bill. I just want to say thank you so much. This story is so amazing, and the awareness that you have. I resonate with that because I went to Sunday school and my parents were Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad left when I was young, and my mom was, quite, I wouldn't say like devout, but, that was her community when she felt abandoned in her marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So that became her community. And it was really, so she kind of brought me in. And yet the person she was at home and the person she was with her church people were like two different people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking it at 8 years old, at 9 years old, at 10 years old, that she wasn't living in God's way. She was just speaking it. And she was showing up at certain places and talking about it. But I knew there's a disconnect.
Yes.
Right? Like you can talk about faith and you can talk about what you believe in, but you have to live it.
As you're sharing, Megan, it occurs to me that there's a misalignment that occurs and forms that initial erroneous belief. There's a misalignment with the connection that we have to our true authentic selves.
Mm-hmm.
What I say to my coaching clients, and I really believe this, is that who we are at our core is whole, perfect, and complete.
Amen.
And the moment that we find in ourselves in a situation where it doesn't make sense and we're a powerless child, infant maybe, toddler, somewhere in there, before the ages of 7, 8 years old, when our brains have developed fully enough to be able to actually say, no, 1 + 1 is 2, it's not 3. Until that happens, we have no choice but to take full responsibility for all the bad things that happen, for all the scary things that happen, all the hurt that we experience. We have no choice. Really, the only choice is die or make it my responsibility. This must be my fault. The reason I'm being treated this way is because there's something about me that isn't okay. And if I can figure out what that is, now maybe I can survive. Maybe I can avoid having it happen again. So it's a survival response.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong with me. And the moment I move from and it's not like I have a concept of I'm whole, perfect, and complete when I'm a child.
Mm-hmm.
I just am.
By being.
I am living joyously and uninhibited until something happens. And then the moment that misalignment happens where something happens in my life and it doesn't make sense and there's nobody to explain it and nobody's being honest with me, then I have to make up an explanation so I can stay alive. I have to make up an explanation. And that explanation is brilliant. Oh, there must be something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong with me, or else this wouldn't have happened. And if I don't believe that, then I'm just completely vulnerable, powerless, and hopeless to do anything about this. So now the belief systems begin to form.
Exactly.
Number 1, there's something wrong with me. Number 2, what is wrong with me? Now the brain is looking for, what is it that's wrong with me? Oh, I'm too short. Oh, I'm too loud. I'm too stupid. I'm too much. I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Various versions of that. And now the belief systems begin to form so that I can survive.
Yep.
Given that I'm not enough, I better try to be more than I am.
Or something different as well. Like I resonate with the feeling of who I am isn't enough or accepted in the world. So I need to change me to fit into the world instead of owning who I am and showing up in the world like as exactly that.
Right.
And that's, for me, that was my trauma is a bit different than your guys, but obviously it's still trauma, but it happened around that young age too. And that was a conversation with my mother that I viewed myself for the first time ever as somehow not okay in my mother's eyes. And that altered us, that set a lifelong long pattern of habits and choices that I made in my life that were absolutely not healthy, but it was all around the belief that I was just not okay in my mother's eyes. And that's one of the hardest things that we can go through when these people we love unconditionally as a child tell you that you're somehow not okay, right?
Exactly.
What Bill, you shared there really speaks to what are we recovering from? We're recovering from these belief systems that have multiple layers of repeated incidences over years and decades that becomes our conditioning. And maybe you can speak to this on when you work with clients with internal family systems. But I just notice as I work with my clients that as we come to the middle of life, it's this beautiful opportunity to unpack our conditioning.
Exactly.
And unpack the belief systems from which we finally have the space and time to recover from, as you brilliantly put it.
Yeah. So early on, before I discovered Byron Katie, and maybe even while I was trying it on and seeing how well it worked for me, I was doing things like studying the law of attraction. I was attending landmark education courses. My mind was focused on the idea that if now it's true that the beliefs that I have aren't accurate and they're not serving me, then I need to change those beliefs. And at that point, what I didn't realize is that if we just trade one belief in for another, we're not healing. We're just taking control as best we can of how we perceive the world. Problem with that is that requires ongoing effort and focus. And we have a limited amount of capacity. And for those of us that have endured trauma growing up, that capacity is taken up the moment we wake up in the morning. We don't start with a full bucket. I use the metaphor of a bucket. Imagine a 5-gallon bucket. We're issued that at birth. It's completely empty, and it's given to us so that we can hold whatever life gives us today. And then in a healthy environment where we're loved by capable caretakers, they help us to empty out that bucket every day. Oh, you're okay. I mean, that's the message. You're okay. I'm sorry that happened to you. That's not about you. Life is happening, and you're okay. Let's empty out that bucket. You're loved. But when there's nothing like that happening, and in fact, when the caretakers themselves are the ones that are filling the bucket up for me, then what do I do with that? It has to stay inside. It stays in my bucket. So over time, the bucket gets more and more and more full. Where people that don't experience trauma, they may enter into adulthood with still 50% capacity or more. Mm-hmm. I feel like I entered into adulthood whenever that happened, I think 12, with about 90% of my capacity already used up by trying to manage all this trauma.
Totally.
Now, the trauma can be associated with all of those beliefs. In fact, it very much directly is associated with all those beliefs. And if I've got 90% capacity already used up, just internally, unconsciously managing all those beliefs, now if I want to take on changing those beliefs, I've only got 10% left to do that in. Mm-hmm. And that's not a lot of capacity. And if the effort that I put forth in like battling or trying to change those beliefs uses up all my 10%, how am I going to function in life? How am I going to do in relationships and on the job and as a parent? Not very well.
Yeah.
Because my bucket's full. I'm making a mess. I'm spilling all over the place. So thank God for IFS, because IFS actually increases capacity by emptying the bucket out. We don't replace beliefs with other beliefs. We watch as beliefs fall apart. Mm-hmm. Once we hear from our parts and directly learn from them that they concluded very brilliantly and logically something that isn't actually true, so that they can survive. Now that we meet them, learn from them, get to know them, and earn their trust by not trying to change them, they become open to hearing from us what's actually true. That nurturing caretaking that we didn't get, we give to ourselves by saying, oh yeah, well listen, that happened to you, but it didn't mean there was anything wrong with you. In fact, the fact that it felt misaligned and off for you is evidence that who you are is whole, perfect, and complete. When you experienced something that was not aligned with that was about them, not about you. And you were intuitive enough to pick up on that. Like the 8-year-old version of myself that raised my hand looking around the room and realizing I'm all alone. Mm-hmm. I'm the only one that had the intuition, apparently, to know that this was total bullshit, what I was being taught.
Bill, just would love to hear on what you've witnessed in clients when these parts that have had the opportunity to re-examine beliefs and kind of, as you described, let them disintegrate. What do you notice in unburdenings of those kinds?
I'm learning a lot right now about unburdening. My first training took place 5 years ago, and I was trained to take step by step through the model, through the unburdening process. It isn't unicorns and rainbows and magic, but it was taught to me as if it was. Like, we get to the point where we get access to an exiled part that's holding unacceptable beliefs that were unacceptable, feelings that were unacceptable to feel or express. We get to that exile finally. We've traveled back in time using the technology of IFS, and we reconnect with those exiles. We let them know we are future versions of you. We've already experienced everything that you're about to experience. You don't have to do it anymore. You don't have to do it from this moment on. You never have to experience this again. I've already done it for you, and I've come back for you. That gets me every time.
I've come back for you. That's beautiful.
And then we help them. We help them back into the present moment. By doing so, we become their caretakers. They no longer get activated by our current adult lives because they recognize that they first of all, they've been retrieved from the past that they were locked into.
Yeah.
They're now with a loving caretaker, and for the first time beginning to experience what it's like to be okay and to not be vigilant and have to be worried all the time about getting hurt. So now they're not triggered by my current adult life anymore. And as that happens, all of their protectors relax.
Yeah.
Nervous system relax. Everything else starts to change too, right?
Exactly. And as that happens, what naturally occurs is the emergence of all the qualities and resources of what IFS calls self. And that's back to my true self, where I can get access to all of those resources of compassion, clarity, courage. What happens when I'm not living in a state of fear is I begin to show up as my true, authentic self.
Yeah.
Love it.
And that's true for all of my clients too.
All of us.
And IFS makes it all make sense.
Yeah.
Wow. I just wanted to ask you, Bill. So I'm thinking about what you said about having 10% in the bucket.
Yeah.
And doing the work, right? Recovering from these belief systems, the trauma. And so what would you say to somebody who just feels like they don't have 10%? That deep down, their capital S self knows that this work needs to happen. But their capital E ego says, I cannot rock the boat right now. I've got a million things to take care of. And I'm going to just, I can't be the one right now. So I feel like that would be a conundrum for many people, like knowing deep down that there's so much work to be done, but not having the capacity and being afraid, right? So then again, like that fear of their whole world collapsing, even though they're trapped in their world as it is. So I just wonder what you would say to someone who might be feeling that way.
Yeah, I'm hearing, as bad as it is, it's all I've got. I'm afraid of losing it. And I've been there several times in my life, and each time it got bad enough, I hit another bottom, and it got bad enough for me to be willing to try to find another 1%. And that's an interesting thing, is that even when it feels like my bucket's spilling over and I'm at 100% capacity and I got nothing left, there seems to be a reserve tank in there somewhere. And if you can reach deep down into that reserve tank and find that even 1% to be able to just separate from the suffering and separate from the beliefs that say this is impossible, and consider the possibility that something can happen, something magical does begin to happen at that point. And then usually what happens is, and what's happened in my life, is that someone with more self energy than I have shows up and listens without judgment. And something really powerful and magic happens in that space. Like, maybe it's okay for me to be seen. Maybe it's okay for me to consider something as better than what I'm experiencing now. Is it okay to have hope? Even though in my 99% of the time, hope hurts, is it okay to have hope this time? Can I take a little bit of a risk and trust that something can change? And in that trust and in that hope, maybe I'm willing to take a risk and try something different, like be vulnerable with somebody, tell the truth about me.
Wow. So I'm wondering if you have any tools or practices. We kind of like to offer something up for our listeners that maybe is recognizing exactly what Megan said, where like, I don't have any space or I'm not willing.
Yeah.
What is something you could offer up for our listeners that might start to lead them down the path for those kind of deeper, conversations?
Great question. I recommend that you get a blank notebook and that you go to page 4 or 5 in that notebook and write in the top right corner of the right-hand page the year of your birth. And then in every page after that, write the next year and the next year and the next year until it's 2024. And now, if you can remember that it happened in your life, it was significant, begin to write down the memories that correlate with those years. And after you've done that, then look at those memories and ask yourself, what did I believe about myself? What did I believe about the world? What did this event do to help me form my beliefs? Now that you begin to inventory the beliefs that you have, these beliefs now begin to reflect why life makes sense the way it does right now. And if you don't like the life that you're having that it makes sense in, you can begin to challenge those beliefs. You can use the work of Byron Katie. You can use IFS. There's a million ways to do it.
What a great suggestion. I love that you're encouraging the writing practice because it can be so powerful. And I feel like there might be gaps in there. So what happens if, we go back and I don't remember my years between 8 and 9 or whatever it is. Is it just leave the page blank for now and see how everything else fills in around it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's your memories. It's not what you were told.
Yeah.
Just write down what you can remember. I remember roughly 3 years old. So 1958, my sister and I were on an aluminum picnic table that collapsed. That sticks out.
Yeah.
Write it down. Do I know what I believed about that? Not yet.
But it'll come.
It'll come to me.
So you're essentially just creating a bit of a map of
That's right.
your entire life that you can go back and fill in the gaps and build awareness and healing through. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
Yeah, it's kind of like knocking at the door and saying, "Okay, unconscious, please help."
Yeah,
I help me to connect with you.
Yeah,
it's back there. It's all there. It's all there, and our parts will allow us access once they begin to trust us.
Exactly.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Bill. That's great tips for there.
It's a beautiful exercise. It's like developing the coach for your younger parts in real life time, like giving them the safe, caring adult that they didn't have at those times, those many times.
Those memories that will fill up your notebook are going to be prompted by what's happening in your life today, right now. So I experienced something and I noticed that I feel uptight inside. I just assume that there's a memory that is connected with that and a belief that was formed from a memory that has me reacting that way automatically inside.
Yep.
So I don't understand what's happening inside. Do I want to try to remember what caused that? No. Yep. What I do instead is get curious about the experience I'm having in this moment using whatever model you use. I highly recommend IFS. So with IFS, I would bring my attention inside and get really detailed about what I'm noticing about the internal experience that I'm having. Okay, this is in my chest. It's really tight. Oh, I can feel like I'm holding my breath. I'm just going to sit with this for a minute. Oh, what's this memory? What is this? What is this? Oh, interesting. Why would that come up right now? Well, it's because it's directly connected. And our parts are saying, listen to me. I've been trying to get your attention. Thanks for noticing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill, I'd love to give you the opportunity to read your quote. I don't know if you have it up.
I do. And I wish I could remember the story where this showed up in my life, but I'll just say that when it showed up, I thought, that's me. That's me. I get to live that life. That's the life I get to live. So here it is. This is by Lawrence Pearsall Jacks. A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing, and leaves others to determine whether he is working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both. Thank you, SoulNet community, for joining us in our heart-to-heart conversation with Bill.
We covered so many great topics with him that we could not fit it all into one episode, so our next drop will be part 2 of this conversation. As always, follow us on Instagram at SoulNet Podcast and on Spotify to stay updated on our episodes.